Unfiltered office hours, asking our co-founders whatever we want, dropping knowledge. Management, baby.
Okay.
All right.
So should we do an intro, Bob?
We love our intros that are totally
right.
not written at all by
Yeah,
AI.
definitely not reading this off of my other monitor. We're back with another episode of Unfiltered Office Hours, where we talk about the big questions shaping how AI actually works in the workplace.
And this time we're going deep on the technical side with our CTO, Mitch, and VP of Engineering, Ed, our resident nerds. Because if you're an IT leader being asked to add AIs to everything, you're not alone.
So we are here to be your slightly underqualified guides, asking questions we don't even fully understand so that these two can show off how smart they are.
Let's get into it. Again, we like to check in. How was our intro before we get into anything else?
It was good.
It seemed pretty solid. Yeah, seemed solid.
Yeah.
No
Natural.
notes.
No notes. It's pretty good.
Pretty human sounding.
Yeah. You know,
I'd say
good
so.
nerd reference.
The models are getting better, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, segment one, we have build versus buy. A lot of teams start with the same idea. We'll just plug ChatGPT into our docs, and then we'll just call it a day. A lot of our customers find that maybe that doesn't work after trying it. But what are your takes on all that?
So there's a bunch of different answers in there, but effectively, you're starting to put knowledge into AI and get answers out of the data that you have. Yes, you can connect ChatGPT to your data and hope for the best. And that's like step one, where you do this, and all of a sudden you're sharing 10 years of data to GPT-5, and it's trying to pick out answers out of just really bad, really old, inaccurate stuff. And then you might go, well, we actually have all this information and we don't want it, but I'm going to go and build my own quote unquote source of truth, right? Go and build a search index that only has the information that I care about, and then plug that into ChatGPT, or build your own AI chatbot on top of that. And on the surface, it seems really easy because there's about 1,000 or probably tens of thousands of tutorials out there on how to build out a RAG pipeline and how to index your documents, how to create embeddings for your documents and chunk them and all sorts of stuff. But there's so much to that pipeline that needs to happen to make it, one, fresh. You have to think about how many times you want to refresh your data. Is it hourly, daily? Is it in real time? The next is thinking about permissions. How do you manage the permissions of all of the data that's being put into your search index? And then just the time needed to spin up all the real services you need to make it production ready, because it's more than just a single search index. You need that. You need all the services to run the OpenAI or the models that you want to do, all the embeddings, all the integrations that you have to build and connect. So there's just so much. It's like a tip of the iceberg, right? It looks easy, but then when you get into it, you realize just how much you have to add into the system to make it production ready.
Yeah. I think that you're going to see that you're able to get something probably working and you're going to feel good about it. And then again, that tip of the iceberg scenario is going to play out and you're going to be like, whoa, there's more to this. And someone's going to start depending on it. And it's going to have underlying problems that you weren't anticipating. And suddenly you're supporting something that's way bigger than you ever thought it was going to be. I think all of those things begin to kind of add up. So you probably get started well, and then you start to crumble under the weight of it.
So how do you think someone should then try to calculate the true cost of maintaining this DIY setup?
Well, I think ultimately the biggest question you're going to have, I think, is, are your users actually gaining value from it? That's going to be your first measurement. I think that's going to be your key. Like, for all the discussion of the various technologies we could implement, are the answers you're getting the right answers, and what is it eliminating basically that your team would otherwise have to do? So I think that's the ultimate goal of what you're trying to accomplish. Mitch, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, when I think about the true cost, I do think about the people cost. the people to develop it, the people to support it, the people to maintain it. As AI just continues to advance so quickly, you have to keep on top of it. You have to decide if you're going to change models or change embeddings, and then you have to assign people to do that. Now, granted, you say, well, you have people, AI can vibe code the whole thing, and that's true too, but still, there's still people involved in making sure that it actually works and actually works right and is built in a way that can support your business. Because if it's buggy, if it doesn't work right, then you end up being a big detriment, and then you have all that sunk cost of that development put into it.
Beyond the sunk costs, are there actual risks, like data risks, permissions, like things like that you've seen go sideways when people try to build?
I would say the complexity of a Google Drive integration with complete permission control is pretty high and pretty easy to make a mistake. So if there isn't a full quality assurance program, a full testing program added to that to make sure that you aren't accidentally leaking data or exposing data, that's a pretty big risk. And if you're not dedicating the time to do that, then you could be accidentally leaking information that you shouldn't.
I think the other piece to that would be the hallucination story, right? Where the data should be grounded in something that's actually verified and works for the user who's getting that particular answer from the AI system. And there's probably scenarios where like not being able to get on the Wi-Fi is not that big of a deal, but there's probably other scenarios where the information that you're gathering is kind of mission critical to the thing that you're choosing to provide that to the person you're trying to provide that answer to. And getting it wrong and it having not been grounded in the true knowledge of the correct answer, I think that offers a huge risk as well, separate from the permission problem, which is obviously huge.
If there's a team that maybe has started to experiment with starting to build something, an MVP of this, what would you advise? Is there a practical next step? Should they just give up now? What can they do?
I would certainly advise them to look for more complete systems out there that they can plug in. Because when you want a dedicated system to retrieve information, make sure that's accurate, you should be thinking about that holistically, and then think about how that plugs into your overall AI technology stack. Because when you start to get into building agents and chatbots and other things for the rest of your company, you need the foundation to be strong. If the foundation isn't set up properly and it's built with, potentially fragile tech or things that have been vibe coded, well, you're just going to run into problems later on down, right? Because it's just not a good foundation. So yeah, I would consider these costs, these drains, these complexities, and compare that to what is available right now, and really consider buying, if that's either buying a product or using an open source off the shelf system, something that is more complete than building these from scratch.
And I totally agree with that. I would say if there's any value in what they're doing, it would just be, I would think, be largely exploratory, making sure that they actually do see the value that they were hoping to get before they make the purchase. But I think Mitch is absolutely correct. It's probably not a system that you ultimately want to own. It has too many moving parts, very complicated, and so you probably want to leave it to an expert. I think that's probably would be my advice. But certainly, it's worth making sure the value's there.
All right. So what is sort of the number one thing maybe teams underestimate when they're thinking about, why can't I just connect RAG to a vector database? I've heard of these tools, Pinecone, Turbo Puffer. I don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
but I know that they've come up in customer calls.
Yeah, sure. Mitch, I would say like Mitch and I are on, calls ourselves with some of those vendors, and we talk to them ourselves. So I'm sure our customers are doing the same thing. The people who are interested in building their own solutions are doing the same thing, and they're getting a story there that I think is interesting. I don't want to take anything away from those products. They're probably solid. They're great at what they're doing. I think if you're like Mitch or I on that conversation, though, like the comment will be, well, what we'll do is we'll like take advantage of like your data to generate vectors, put it in this vector database, and then you'll be able to search against it. Like, okay, well, we do that today, right? That's part of our answer, that's part of our solution. So like, what part of it are you taking? Are you taking the vectors? Are you handling the keyword search part of what we do? Because we're doing a hybrid search solution. And they're like, no, we're not really there on the hybrid search yet. We're just doing the vectors. Okay, well then what about the models? Are you helping us to like pick the models, the embeddings that we're trying to generate? No, you still generate your embeddings. Okay, so which piece of the solution are you kind of doing? Well, we're strictly in this vector space, and we're evolving more towards some of the things that you're talking about. And I think that's all fine and good. And I think it's a fine place to be. And I'm sure that what their solution is doing is great. But I think the point is, and what Mitch and I are asking in those calls, and what I think our customers are asking in this calls, is to build a complete solution. You're just one slice of the puzzle that we're putting together, right? You're just one part of the puzzle. Mitch has kind of talked about the permissioning piece and all of that, but then that search algorithm that you actually have to build, it's not just going to be that semantic result. It's going to be this hybrid search result that we have to kind of all orchestrate together with that permission thing. And it's not going to be just a matter of just throwing my data into the system. There's too many things you have to solve between there and just a vector solution coming back. So it's not just a turnkey solution out of the gate.
If you had to name all the pieces of the puzzle, if that was just one piece, what are all the other pieces?
Actually, I think Mitch kind of rattled them off there earlier, right? You actually have to first have the data and have a way of obtaining the content that you're looking to bring in. You probably have to disassemble that content because it's not all just going to fit as one big blob, right? You're going to have to chunk it, as he basically said, in some meaningful way that you could index and be able to find the results again, and be able to recall the results again. You're actually going to obviously be able to connect that index back to those permissions that we talked about. You're then going to need to figure out the algorithm that index is going to run against that index. And by that, I mean, what actually is valuable? What actually is valuable? What is the more weighted things that the algorithm should be considered to make sure that the ranking that's coming back from that recalled documents that you just found is sorting them in the best way for the user? And then you're going to need to figure out ultimately how to organize that into some kind of context that's going to be meaningful to hand to an LLM to give you an answer. So there's a lot of pieces there. It's probably bringing together, I keep saying index, it's probably bringing together multiple indexes in some meaningful way to organize that content well for the LLM to be able to answer.
What about the permissions piece? When factoring that in, like where would that start to fall apart first for people trying to build this?
Well, I think the first thing is each of these systems that you're ingesting from, they all have their own permission model, and you have to be able to obtain that permission model and be able to organize it and retain it in a way that, okay, now in real time, someone's asking for a piece of content that you're searching for. Does that person that have that permission to be able to see that content, right? And I think that lineage back to the source system from which you're ingesting, that all has to be retained throughout the whole process.
It sounds like biting off more than is worth chewing.
It's a hard problem for sure. And again, that's where like you have to decide whether or not that's something you want to take on. You end up getting a cool demo going, and then everyone starts to find value in it. And then there's more questions that come to you as the person who's building that. And suddenly you have a whole enterprise important project that you didn't even expect that you're going to be supporting, and you're supporting it. And it's taken away from probably what your core competency and whatever you're actually trying to sell is. So going back to kind of Mitch's point earlier, I think it's a matter of probably being in more of a buy situation where you're working with people who are focused on this all the time, and it is their core competency.
So this is a really good segue, naturally, with kind of plugging into something that's pre-built, that thing in the middle of build versus buy. We have MCP, which is just the hot word. we hear this a lot. If GitLab or Coda has their own MCP, why can't we just use that for search? What do you say to someone asking that? Why do we even need Guru?
That is a great question, and one that we get a lot too. So MCP is not a utopia, right? It isn't a panacea for your knowledge management problems. And the first step is just thinking about having to plug 20, 30, 40 different MCP servers into an LLM and asking the LLM to properly determine what MCP server and what MCP tool to use to extract the information that you need. In our own testing, we're seeing that it struggles after 30, 40, 50 tools, which is a lot of tools, right? And to think about the broad aspect of all the different searches and tools that come with all these MCP servers, that's going to be a problem. Could that eventually be solved with better AI? Yes, it could be. Then the second problem that I see is one of distribution. MCP is still a very young standard, and not every application on the market actually has an official MCP server. A lot of them are being developed by third parties, by other people besides the vendor themselves, and they're being distributed that way, right? There's no official Salesforce MCP server as far as I know, but there are plenty of those that live out there in the market that you could go and grab and try to use. And now you have a security problem because people are picking stuff up off the internet and injecting it in between themselves and the AI, and who knows what is happening inside that MCP server. Then there's the problem that if everyone starts to just use MCP and there's thousands of users and you have tens of thousands of searches happening across 20, 30 apps, you're going to hit API limits because all these systems have the API limits built in. So there's all sorts of issues with just using MCP as your primary vehicle. And we didn't even get into the accuracy, the better search models that can be built with a tool that we just talked about. We haven't even gone there yet.
That makes sense. Is that so? I've heard. I think it was you. I don't know. You're all much smarter than me. But someone's referred to the nesting doll issue when talking about MCP. What is that? How do I understand that?
Hey, you want to try to tackle this one?
No, this one's you, Mitch. This one's you.
Okay. Did I say this? Okay. So the MCP nesting doll issue is a lot of tools are building AI workflows within themselves. And within that workflow, say Zapier, right? Zapier has workflows. Those in turn could call other MCPs, right? Using MCP servers. And then you could have an MCP client calling the Zapier MCP server, which then calls other MCP servers. And then you end up in this circular kind of nesting doll situation where MCP servers are calling other MCP servers, which are calling other MCP servers. And it's a fascinating problem in this new world where everyone is now able to build to the same standard. And so then that standard just becomes prolific. It's just everywhere. And it's going to cause some really interesting problems with AI architecture diagrams later on.
So how should we use MCP? How will we use MCP?
Well, so, I mean, I think the first thing we should basically say is that the MCP is offering us tools to the LLM, right? So we're going to be providing an opportunity for the LLM to take actions on our behalf. And to this extent, the actions that we have been talking about are largely search oriented, but I think we'll extend that, right? For in the case of Guru, the ability for us to kind of have some kind of conversation or discover some piece of knowledge and ultimately have the opportunity to create a card and allow the MCP to actually create a card. So we're going to, at Guru, attempt to integrate MCP in to take action for you. If we just kind of focus on the search piece for a minute, though, I mean, we kind of go back to some of the points that Mitch was making just a second ago. Yeah, we could you could, in theory, use MCP to kind of federate out to all of these individual systems and use all of these individual systems search. My guess is that is a recipe for a bad result. I think I don't want to disparage any individual other company's search facility, but if I go into any of those, I don't usually have that great of an experience. And when I come into Guru, I generally do have a good experience. And why is that? Well, we invested in it, right? We have a lot of investment in how that search algorithm works, its ability to use different techniques to bring data together and do it across systems and make it work. And so the way we're going to use it, the way we're going to use something like that from our own perspective is to expose that as MCP as well. And if somebody does ask a question and they want that verified knowledge, well, okay, we're not going to send you out to 15 different other MCP hosts that are out there. We're going to use our solution, which has ingested all of that data and made it magically work together well. And it's going to be one quick call, and it's going to bring the data back. And the LLM that we're using inside of Guru's answers is going to provide you a fantastic answer. And then you're going to take that answer from there and use those other MCP actions that I just described, like create a card or create an announcement or all the different things that you probably know and love from Guru today. And it's all going to kind of be organized in a sweet way where the LLM can make some smart decisions on your behalf based on the kind of things that you're asking it to do.
How do you think someone should think about, I guess, like, is there a good rule of thumb someone should have of when to search Guru directly, when to search it using an MCP server, or when to use other MCP servers to go out there and fetch things from other tools?
Well, I think the first question is, how important is that answer to you, right? Because I do think one of the things that you're going to get from Guru is the verified knowledge, right? So I think that if you're asking questions that are going to really require that answer to be verified, I think Guru is probably your top choice for that. The other thing that comes to mind to me would be, and don't get me wrong, I think we could use Guru for this, but just to kind of give the MCP tools their due as well. If you're asking kind of more operational kind of questions, kind of like what's the real-time inventory of X, I think that's more of an MCP kind of question versus the when is the deadline for my healthcare benefits to be submitted and what are the plan options. Well, that's kind of more verified information I'd rather get from Guru. Mitch, any thoughts from your side as to like what other things we could do?
That's a great distinction. If you think about real-time live data coming from an application, that is perfect for an MCP call because the LLM can figure out how to do the right types of filters or queries against that very specific data set. But if it's all about that knowledge, whether it's operational policies, whether it's information that helps you perform tasks, run the business, all of that. And that sits in documents, that sits in Slack threads, or it might even sit in tickets. That is where Guru shines. And that is why you would want to use a Guru MCP server to search, because we can bring all that together and turn that into a single place where you can get all that information, as opposed to trying to query 5 different servers and ask the LLM to put it all together. So yeah, I really like that distinction.
Okay. So there's more laws coming out. There's the EU AI Act, there's state laws in the US, but this idea of explainability for answers within AI, it's becoming less of a nice to have and more of a legal requirement in some cases. My understanding was that the answers coming out of ChatGPT and things are just like, it's a black box. But what are we doing as Guru make that less of a black box for people?
Yeah. This is a great one. And this is a problem that Rick and Ed and Guru in general identified very early, because even though you can get an answer out of ChatGPT, you have no idea how or why it generated that answer. And then no one in the company knows what answers are being given out, right? So if you go back to the original problem of connecting your Google Drive and having 10 years of data being available, and you ask a question and you get an answer, well, only you see that answer. You don't know if it's correct or not. No one else has any possible way to help you get the right answer, because that is a one-to-one interaction. So adding transparency and adding explainability to a system is critical to make an AI system work like this. And when I say transparency, what I mean is there's a clear chain of control and visibility of the data, of the question and the answer, so that the managers who are setting this up can monitor whether or not the AI is providing the right answer to their employees. And if you think about, again, 1,000 people asking this same question, are you actually providing them the same accurate answer? And we built this into Guru from day one because we recognized that AI is a black box. So how do we shine more light into that so that people can make better choices and try to improve the system? And then the explainability part, that's an extra level of calls effectively that we make in order to ensure that we explain how we generated a particular answer. And so the AI does a little bit of retrospective and says, how did I generate this answer? What did I do, and how can I explain to the user how I got here? And then when you read the explainability and you read the answer and you have the transparency there, you have all of the pieces in order to improve the system, whether it's you're changing the information that it's being served, or you're changing the prompt of the AI, or you're educating your employees on how to use it properly. And you get all of that because of the transparency that we've built in. Without that, you have no idea what your employees are asking ChatGPT or Claude or any of those other tools. But with Guru, you have that visibility, and that gives you that power to go and be impactful at your company.
That does feel like a major differentiator for us, where, there's answer details that if you're getting an individual answer to your question, you can dive in and see how it was generated. So you feel more confident. But like you said, there's that whole other aspect where like the admins, the subject matter experts, managers, leadership can go in and fine tune and see like the patterns of their team, where the gaps, where a tool like ChatGPT is never going to be focused on that, I imagine.
Yeah, I would think that's right. I mean, I think you hit on the one thing that I would wanted to expand on, which would be the gaps, right? I think the fact that you can kind of see the kind of questions that are being asked, and yeah, you can try to correct them and try to make them a better answer. But I think you can also see scenarios where we just don't have the answer to the kind of questions that people are asking, and it just gives the organization the opportunity to fill in those gaps, and make that available to everyone. I just think that's fantastic.
Just out of curiosity, do you see how many times a question was asked in a row?
I mean, you can get trending information out of all the questions.
Are you saying you asked the same question over and over
Okay,
and don't
one
remember the answer?
time, I could not find Mark's phone number, and I kept asking it in slightly different ways. I realized only after that, like, someone was going to be like, he needs a restraining order against her. Like, why? And then I was like, it turned out we didn't have that information. I had to get it via text from another source. But I was like, I wonder if like Mitch was in there that night and was like, what the hell is she doing? So,
well, it's very clear we did not have that information. It was right there in the explainability.
Seems
exactly.
like more of an MCP opportunity there.
Yeah. It was not a search issue. It was
Now it's making sense to me.
a
How
lack
it all
of
ties together.
information issue. But yeah, I mean, I would say, is that transparency like how an IT team could know that it's working? Like how does a CIO or, an IT leader actually measure the value of Guru?
Yeah, that one, I would say that I wouldn't ask the IT team leader to monitor every single question. I don't think that that's a viable answer. But what we do offer is the ability to give the power, to delegate that to other department heads, right? So So the IT team can look at Guru and say, okay, this thing allows us to give it to a department. That department can manage their information. That department can manage their questions and answers. And it's very it's almost like a multi-tenant system within the system, so that you are providing an AI platform, but you're also giving the tools for every department to use it how they need to use it. And that's a critical part, because you want these AI systems to be adopted, right? You don't want to necessarily have bottlenecks where individual departments now need to control everything about it. You want to be able to give the management of that and the control of that over to the department. So the CIO would say, okay, I bought this AI platform. I can train my HR department, my engineering department, my finance department on how to use the tool. And then each of them now has the ability to manage and monitor and determine if the tool is successful for themselves. So an HR department can build a benefits agent. Their employees can ask benefits questions. They can look at the answers and say, okay, I'm seeing a lot of answers being generated. 85% of them have thumbs up, right? Like the employees can give feedback up or down, and then you can aggregate that across all the agents that you have and determine if your employees are actually getting the answers that they believe are useful. And the more you distribute that, the more you delegate that, the more you educate your individual departments on how to use this tool, the wider it gets adopted and the more impact you have on your entire organization.
Should we talk about what's coming next? We have so many exciting things coming up, but the thing that I am most excited about is chat. Tell me all about chat. I used it for the first time yesterday, and I was just tickled.
It's not supposed to work that way.
It was great.
Yeah.
Not supposed.
It's not supposed
Did I
to tickle
break
you.
it? Yeah, no, it was great. Tell me about it. Tell them about it.
Yeah, chat. It's the next evolution. I mean, we started with answers, right? And putting transparency and explainability on answers. But now we're allowing you to have a full-on conversation with your knowledge agents so that you can refine the question, refine the answer, change the format of what it's giving to you. So if you want to turn an answer into a customer-facing email, you want to turn it into a poem. That's always my favorite thing, because people just love to make poems when they go into ChatGPT. But yeah, it's all about allowing you to refine that answer, make it better. Ask the chat agent to search for another piece of information to bring into the chat, so that then you can create more robust outputs, right? So, but then on top of that, we're still maintaining that concept of transparency, because again, as you're having chats, as it's generating answers for you, we are still providing that capability to provide the feedback, thumbs up, thumbs down, have that feedback be visible to the people who are managing that agent. And it's really just the foundation for a whole bunch of other things that we want to do. But yeah, chat is the next step for Guru. It's the next step for the knowledge agents that are currently there, and I think it's gonna impress a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it myself. I think the biggest opportunity that I always saw when we were doing answers was this. It just provided me this great answer, and I have more questions about it. It actually sparked my interest about something, and I can actually ask those next set of questions and refine it. And that's what I've been waiting for myself. So I'm so happy we built it. And the other cool thing about it is that once you get one piece of information, you're not just done. That context comes with you. And you can ask another question, and that question could result in going to get more data from Guru with another search. And I just think it's just a way. It's kind of the thing I've been waiting for in Guru, and I'm sure everyone's going to be super excited when they see it. And we're happy to get it out there too.
So you called it kind of foundational to where we want to take the product and other things we're working on right now. So how does it serve as that foundation?
Yeah, once you have a chat interface, you kind of have almost a blank canvas to add a lot of really interesting capabilities. One of the first ones that we're doing is a research mode. And if you think about all of the information that Guru has access to once you connect your tickets, your Salesforce accounts, your Slack threads, you can, within the chat, ask the agent to go and perform research and do a large number of searches and analysis and trending on your behalf. And it will go and effectively give itself a task, go and perform a whole number of searches against the data that you have access to, and then analyze that and put it together back into a big research report that gives you what it is that you're looking for, whether it's, analyzing opportunities from the past quarter, analyzing support tickets from the past 30 days, looking for particular topics of conversation in your Slack threads and analyzing, sentiment over that. All of this is possible and easily built into a chat agent, because now you can kind of talk to that agent and revise the plan and ask it to just go, and it comes back with that report, and you don't need to build a lot of UI for that. It's a very intuitive once you start to add all these different capabilities into chat that, if you're just talking to an AI, it just feels natural.
I think on the element of the research itself, right? You're going to have the opportunity to, one, ask the question, see what it wants, what it thinks it can do, have a chance to refine what it does, and then actually have it execute for this research, these searches that Mitch just described. I think, obviously, this deep research concept exists. I think when somebody sees it against their own data, it's going to be kind of an eye-opening moment for them, because all of their company knowledge is suddenly available to this deep research capability. And I think that is going to be a cool experience for people to see the results come out of, because it's not the same as just doing like the industry web research kind of thing. It's like working on your data itself. Super powerful.
Right. And not just all the data, although whatever you plug into it, of course, we have access to, but it's the data then we've gone and said this is actually the most trusted and important, and that layer of things, I imagine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's that intelligence layer, right? It's a guru's helping to build out that accurate layer of knowledge in your company. And then you do research with that, and your outputs and your results are just much better.
So it sounds like the chat experience also allows us to go beyond our UI. And so, like, how does MCP tie into the chat experience?
Yeah. So we are going to be a full on MCP client in addition to ourselves being an MCP server. And I know that's getting very technical and into the nesting dolls situation. But what that means is we will be able to install third-party MCP servers into the Guru chat. So now you can initiate a research using all the data that you have within Guru, and then post that research to a Slack channel using the Slack MCP server. And you can do all this within the chat interface without needing a lot of, dialogues and windows and UI componentry. All of this is being pulled together by the AI. And so by allowing these third-party MCP servers to be installed, it now adds so much more capabilities to Guru. You can easily say, hey, what are the latest trends out of my support tickets in the past 30 days? Okay, go and create Jira tickets for me, which then tells me to write some documentation back into Guru, but I would assign those Jira tickets to someone in Jira, and all that work would come back to Guru. Or you could just say, hey, Guru, could you create drafts for me from the trending topics coming out of the support tickets. Oh, and by the way, can you do that for me every Monday morning at 9 a.m. and look at the last week's trending topics, have these drafts ready for me to review so that then I can publish them back into our accurate knowledge base. And so we're going to tie all of this together between chat, research, performing MCP actions, and scheduling those actions so that you can truly create an automated knowledge management system.
Wow, yeah. And that's all being built from the chat experience. It's not like a drag and drop logic type of UI necessarily. I guess, is that what you're getting at before, where like opening up chat allows us to do all these new things, not necessarily easily, but easier than it would have taken before this all existed?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would say like some of these workflows that Mitch just described, like for anyone to build out those things on a kind of screen by screen approach, like no one's going to get the functionality they want fast enough and in the way that they actually want it kind of done. But instead, you get into these conversational UIs, like the chat situation that we're talking about. You connect it to MCPs and you let it be able to take those actions. Okay, well, suddenly now that workflow that you would, you want to have, well, you're just describing to the chat what you really want. And it's able to take action on your behalf using these MCPs that are hooked up. I think it just gets you time to value like much faster. So yeah, absolutely. Everything's centered around this new conversation experience.
It does feel big. Yeah, I mean, at first it seemed to me like, yeah, you got to have it just because, everyone's used to ChatGPT. They're used to having a conversation, but it's obviously more than that. It opens up a lot more things. It is powerful for a reason, and it's the UI being adopted for a reason. It's really exciting. All I have left is just AI models are evolving fast. So how are we helping customers stay flexible with that in mind without falling behind?
So one of the things we'll be doing with the chat interface is allowing you to choose the model that you want to use. And this has been a common enough ask from our customers because there is going to be so much choice out there. And depending on what your organization has standardized on or what they feel comfortable with, they want to bring that into the tools that they're using. And so as a foundational kind of AI platform that a company might buy, we need to also be ready to move with the market, be ready to allow customers to pick the models that they want to use, especially because those models just change so dramatically every 3 to 6 months. We have to allow that to happen so that customers gain the benefits of these improved models as quickly as possible.
Got anything else, Ed?
I think we try to keep up as it is. I mean, I think the first thing is the model that you are seeing inside of Guru today has been an evolution over the last few years, right? So we're constantly staying up to date as we can, and we're working with those vendors, those providers to make sure that we're giving the customers the optimal experience. But yeah, I think everyone's going to have a bit of a preference. Everyone's going to see something in the industry on their various social media streams and hear from their person next to them of what's the latest and greatest, and they're going to want to try it. Yeah, I think by default we're going to try to put out the best possible experience. But if somebody wants to try those things and we can make it available to them, in a safe and appropriate way, we're going to expose it. And just part of what it will mean to be able to create your knowledge agents inside of Guru.
I love it. Well, that's all we got for this round. Nerds.
That's
Appreciate
going
you.
in.
That's the sign off.
Unfiltered office hours, asking our co-funders whatever we want, dropping knowledge management, baby.